Hello there. What is going on, everyone? Today we are going to be continuing the Armada ship breakdown series of videos, and we are jumping into flotillas. Today we're going to be talking about the Gozanti class cruiser, or otherwise known as the Gozanti class assault carrier, depending on which variant. We're going to be talking about both of those variants, the titles, some sample builds, and how you might use this ship in your fleets. If you guys are new here to the channel, I do talk a lot about games like Star Wars Armada, as well as other tabletop miniatures games and other Star Wars specific stuff. Also, if you want to enter to win the $25 Amazon gift card giveaway, you just have to be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. It's as simple as that. I'd also love to have you guys join our Discord and check out other social media links. All of that stuff is down in the description below. We have a great family-friendly Discord where you can jump in, ask questions, share builds, paint ideas, and learn and grow and become part of the community. So definitely check that out. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and dive into the Gozanti. So you may have seen this ship on Star Wars Clone Wars or Rebels, or even in X-Wing, or even in The Mandalorian. It's been showing up more and more places. It makes for a great support ship. It's definitely the smallest Imperial ship in the game. It comes on two miniatures on a single base, which makes it the first flotilla. Came out in Wave 3 alongside the GR-75 for the Rebels, and that's basically just means you have multiple ships on a base. Now, this is going to be a hull 3 ship, so very, very fragile. It's a 1 command, 2 squadron, 2 engineering. It's kind of bare bones as far as stats, but it does have one thing that really, really makes it stand out. If you look to the defense tokens, you're going to notice an evade, which is nice, but you're also going to notice the scatter. This is the only ship in the Empire to have the scatter defense token, and one of only 2 ships in the game currently to have the scatter defense token. So that is pretty cool because, again, scatter, usually only seen on ace fighter squadrons, will cancel the entire attack die pool. So it makes you completely safe. It's basically like the perfect defense token, and makes the Gozantis much harder to kill than a lot of other ships might be otherwise, because of the fact that if you don't have the accuracy, doesn't matter how many hits you have, they're not taking any damage at all, and they're going to wipe all those dice away. Now, another vulnerability for this type of ship, being that it is a flotilla, means that it will not inflict damage on non-flotilla ships, which is basically every other ship in the game, minus the GR-75. You're not going to be able to ram somebody and do damage to them. So if a flotilla rams another ship, or it gets rammed by another ship, the flotilla is the only one that takes damage. So that means that's actually one of the more reliable ways to kill this guy, is just ram it with your other ship, or with, if you're facing one of these on the other side of the board. If you can ram them, you're going to put one of 3 damage onto this ship's hull, and they can't take that. So if you don't have any ways to manufacture accuracies, never doubt the power of the ram. Now, they're not the easiest ship to ram because they are moderately fast. They can go up to speed 3, and they have 2 clicks of yaw available at every speed. As you can see, they're flexibly maneuverable, and only have 1 shield on any given side. However, they do have attack dice in the front and sides, which does mean that they can actually shoot. They don't often shoot. However, they're usually used to do other types of commands. I mean, they'll certainly do some shots, and if you do your anti-squadron attacks, then all of a sudden it kind of brings their firepower more in line with other ships of the line that are also at a single die for their anti-squadron attack. And that makes them kind of feel more on par, especially at a much cheaper price. So that's more often than not what Gozanti firepower ends up getting used for, but you don't really bring them to a list for firepower. You bring them for support. They also feature one of the most awesome upgrades in the game, is the fleet support upgrade, which is amazing for being able to support the rest of your fleet. We'll talk about some of those upgrades a little bit later on with our sample builds, and some ways that you might consider running the Gozantis in your fleets. Now, as far as the ship's profile, again, it is a flotilla. It's going to have 2 miniatures on the base. This is what one of them looks like. You're going to see that they have kind of a pretty standard X as far as their arcs are concerned. You have a slightly more narrow side arcs and slightly larger front and rear. A lot of that has to do with the size of the base and where the X is located, right about center of the base, kind of enhancing the profile of the rear and the front. Of course, you don't want to have too many people in your rear, because you don't even get to shoot out of the rear unless, of course, it is a squadron attack. They are usually used for, again, anti-squadron attacks, but sometimes it's nice if you do manage to get double arc on a ship and decide to throw a concentrate fire on there. Gozantis have been known to throw a little bit of dice at enemy ships from time to time, especially if they get close enough. The two versions of our ship will start off with the Gozanti class cruisers. This is going to be our cheapest version at 23 points. This is probably the most common way to run a Gozanti, because usually when they're being run for their cost and for the fleet support ability, and that's what this ship can do. It's got fleet support at only 23 points, so a lot of times you run maybe a single fleet support upgrade or a moderate build. There's not too many things that you can put on here, but it's an extra activation, and that's one of the things that was a really big deal when these came out. Initially, people would run a lot of Gozantis to really spam activations to ensure that they could go last with a big ship like a Star Destroyer. And then, of course, we do have the ruling now that you can only have 2 flotillas in a build. So you're capped at only 2 Gozantis in a build, as well as, since they are a flotilla cannot be your flagship. So you cannot put your commander on board this ship. That is one of the kind of things, because people would just send these out into the corners of the board as a lifeboat with their commander, and then have a whole bunch of squadrons just can manage to do damage and not be eliminated. Also, if only thing you have left on the board are squadrons and or flotillas, you're still tabled. So they don't really count as a full ship in terms of you not being tabled. So again, flotillas have a lot of extra rules because they were so cheap. Some people used to abuse them when they first came out and they were treated just like normal ships. So they have a lot of these extra little rulings on them. So with the Gozanti class cruisers, one of the things that I think stands out is the fact that it's got a black anti-squadron die, which actually gives this guy a reasonable amount of punch when flacking enemy squadrons. This one does need to be a little bit closer to the action than the other version of the Gozanti, but that's okay because it does have the scatter, which usually helps it survive if it gets a little bit closer. Again, the black die for anti-squadron is got a pretty good chance of doing damage, and then if you get that close to things, maybe you're close enough to an enemy ship to be able to throw a blue die at them. Also, of course, hoping you don't get the accuracy there, but at least it has a respectable amount of poke damage on the Gozanti class cruiser here, and with the squadron value of 2 for its point value, it makes it actually a very decent squadron pusher. So these are usually run to push squadrons or to support the rest of the fleet, or in some cases, both. We'll move up to the Gozanti class assault carriers. I would say the option less taken, because it's going to be 5 more points at 28 points for the assault carriers. You're going to notice 2 big changes on this version over the other one. One is that we're upgrading our anti-squadron die from black to blue, and that can be a mixed bag. And then the other one is that we're upgrading our front arc from blue to red. Now, the blue to red is probably the more significant of the 2 changes, because that increases your attack range and also allows it to factor into certain commanders like Armada that, if you're able to get an obstructed shot, you can now potentially roll 2 red out the front on such a cheap ship, which is pretty fun. However, the blue die, actually, while it has longer range, if you're trying to do anti-squadron attacking, you do have actual less hit results on the blue, so you can attack farther out, but you're less likely to get that damage in. So some people prefer black dice on squadrons, depending on the build they're going with. I'm usually more of a black dice fan than blue dice fans, because also if you have squadrons at black dice range, you're also less likely to have an obstructed shot to them, whereas blue and red dice squadron attacks, while they're certainly convenient because you can hit out so far, there's a lot more likelihood that you're going to have something in the way of those shots. So let's talk about the titles. We've got 2 different titles available for the Gozantis. We've got the Vector, which has the squadron command ability on it at only 2 points. It says, when you do a squadron command, the speed of each squadron without heavy you activate is increased by 1 to a maximum of 5 until the end of its activation. So this is just a good, well-rounded, simple ability to just beef up your squadron speed a little bit. It's not the most common title that's taken, primarily because it's something that isn't really needed. The reason I say it's not really needed is just because of the fact that Imperial squadrons tend to be pretty fast. They're not all super fast, but they tend to be pretty fast. And the ones that need the speed boost tend to have heavy. So, you know, it's not great, but I think it works really well like in a Sloan fleet, because it can make your regular TIE fighters go from 4 to 5, and that's pretty cool. But again, sometimes it's not needed. Speed 4 is still pretty good. It still has a lot of range to it, and like a lot of the you know, a lot of the other ships that you know, that you'd like to use it for either are already speed 5, so you can't make them speed 6, or already have heavy. One thing I actually think that this is really nice for the Vector is strange, a little outside of the box, is if you're running fire sprays and you do want to activate them instead of letting them trigger with Rogue. You know, being able to push a fire spray up to speed 4 is pretty cool, because they also have bomber, and they're a pretty nasty force. But generally that's inefficient, right? So Vector, really, I think one of the best uses for Vector is being able to push TIE fighters up to speed 5. You can't really increase your TIE bombers with them, because again, a lot of that stuff has heavy. Your lambdas, which you'd want to go a little faster, also have heavy. I mean, there is yeah, you can make your TIE advanced run speed 5 too. I don't usually run advanced, so they're not the greatest things out there. I guess your Phantoms, you can make them speed 5 as well. So there is some options for it, but most of them are only pushing from somebody from 4 to 5, and that's not as big a deal. The Suppressor is definitely the title I like a lot better. It's a 4-point title. It says, after an enemy ship ends its activation, if at distance 1 through 3, you may choose and exhaust one of its defense tokens. Now, I love this title. It basically sets you out there and says, hey, anybody who comes in here, it doesn't matter how many ships, any ship that comes into this zone, I get to choose and exhaust one of your defense tokens, which means I can exhaust that brace. Or if you're another flotilla, I can get your scatter. I get to pick. And so I love that. And it really, it puts a big target on this ship, though. So this is, when you do run a suppressor, people are definitely gunning for it. But because, again, the Gozanti has that scatter, it can be tricky to take this thing out. So if you're going against ships that have mechanics on them that are going to, like a Home 1 or some other turbo laser upgrade that's going to manufacture accuracies, you'll want to keep this one a little bit more carefully placed. But still, it's a fantastic title. You're paying a little bit more for it. And you know, if you put too many upgrades on the Gozanti, all of a sudden it kind of stops being a cheap ship, and that's part of the appeal for taking it. So let's go ahead and look at some builds for Gozantis. Let's start off with the Gozanti class cruisers. Now, this is a kind of a semi-typical way to run a Gozanti cruiser. You might run both of these or only one of these if you're running for a very, very cheap activation and you don't want to run it completely naked. CommsNet is one of the most common tokens. It certainly has been one of the most common ways to run a Gozanti for a very long time. It's certainly not the only way to run a Gozanti. You also have things like parts resupply or munitions resupply that also put out tokens, and they're only a little bit more expensive, so it depends on what you want to do. But the idea of having a single Gozanti out there that hands out tokens, whether it's CommsNet, parts resupply, or munitions resupply, again, those are new ones that came in the Clone Wars wave, is a very common way to have a cheap Gozanti that's out there that's putting out a lot of tokens. It's very useful. CommsNet only gives one token per turn, and you have to give your token, but it gives you the flexibility of being able to pick what kind of token you're going to want. So it's nice if somebody needs nav or something like that as well. And then Darth Vader Officer is really just a really great option to put on a Gozanti. The reason being is he gives your other ships rerolls. They just have to sacrifice an officer or a commander on board that ship to do it. Basically, he chokes somebody out. And the Gozanti usually doesn't need a reroll because it's only rolling one dice a lot. It's not really that big of a deal, so it makes sense to put it on him so he can choke out everybody else. Of course, you want to keep this ship kind of centrally located. You want to be close enough to your other ships at 1 to 5, so one range ruler length of all your other ships so that you can do this. And he works very, very well in fleets that have officers that only do something at the beginning of the game and then have no function, because then they're still on board that ship, and then you get a second use out of those officers. Darth Vader as an officer is so great on board a Gozanti. He is actually one of my favorite cards in the entire Empire because he kind of completely usurped the place of Darth Vader as a commander, who also gives rerolls at the cost of a defense token. And here you just like, oh, now I can just get free rerolls. And granted, I'm only getting 1 or maybe 2. They'll give your flagship if you don't need your commander anymore. You really need the reroll. You can choke out your commander also. But having the option to do it when you really, really need it is great. So I really like this setup. I have a assault carrier sample build here. This is an interesting one because I decided to put Riva Demence on here, and she was one of the newer officers that came out with the Superstar Destroyer pack, and she allows you to potentially you look at her, you might not think that, hey, I don't want her on a Gozanti, because after you're declared as the target of an attack, if the defending hull zone has at least one shield remaining, you may exhaust this card to ready a defense token. Well, I only have one shield anywhere, so once I'm attacked and I lose a shield, then she's useless. Right. Think about scatter in this case, though. A lot of times when you get attacked, you're scattering and you're not taking any damage. So if if you're being attacked multiple times in a turn, now all of a sudden, you attack me in the front, I scatter. Oh, but now I'll attack you again. Your scatter is exhausted. Oh, wait, but you didn't do any damage last time, so I still have my shields there. Now I get my scatter back. She's kind of like, a scatter protection, type of upgrade. And also, if you do get some damage through, you can always just fly past them and give them a different side of you. It's still useful because you're not always being attacked from the exact same arc on every turn either. So I think she's got some use on board of Gozanti if you want it to stay alive a little bit longer. Maybe you've got a jamming field in here. Now this is a one that a lot of people didn't like when it first came out, but I think it's got definitely some use. If you are pushing squadrons with this one, you will want to push them forward, do the attacking, and then fly forward into them, and then make sure that they're obstructed on the return fire aspect, which may come later. And then, of course, reserve hangar deck is a good option to put on a Gozanti. You can get one of your TIE interceptors back with 2 health, which is a really nice way. For only 3 points, it kind of gets you a little bit of a point advantage there as well. We'll look at some of the named builds. I put a Gozanti class cruiser here, kind of wanting to support the fleet a little bit. Now this is a build for maybe a mixed fleet where you have some TIE fighters and some TIE bombers, because we have Bomber Command Center here, but again, in any Bomber Command Center, we don't want only bombers. We don't want only people that can't really take out enemy squadrons, because then a couple of enemy A-Wings come in and just wreak havoc on our bombers. So we need some TIE fighters here. So that's why I have Vector. And the idea of this ship is this isn't a fleet where I want the Gozanti to be able to push the TIE fighters forward to lock down the enemy squadrons, or the basically the non-heavy ships. And then I want my other ships to be able to push the bombers. But this guy has the Bomber Command Center to help those bombers. And Vanto is an interesting one on this one. He's a little on the expensive side, but it depends on if you really want to be able to activate Vector to be able to hit up to 4 TIE fighters, which could be a good, well-rounded number of cheaper fighters to have in your build, because he's saying after the basically he gives you a free command token, so what you can do in this case is have expanded hangar bay, pushing your squadron value to 3, Vanto giving you a free token. Now all of a sudden this little Gozanti's pushing 4 TIE fighters, and they're all being bumped up to speed 5. Leaving the Bomber Command Center bubble available for your other, like maybe you've got a Victory or a Phoenix Home, somebody out there like a Quasar rather, pushing some TIE bombers, and you're doing something like that. So this is just kind of a mixed fleet option for a carrier option for Gozanti, although a lot of times people just run Bomber Command Center without too much more, and that's fine too. And then I'm going to go with my favorite Gozanti build, the Jerk Gozanti. This one is obnoxious and it's hard to kill. And you can run this one on either version. I put this one on the assault carriers to kind of make them even more jerky because they can poke out a little bit farther. But here we've put Minister Tua as our officer, which is going to give us the defensive retrofit slot. And of course we put electronic countermeasures on there. Now this means that now, even if your opponent does roll the accuracy, you can still manually spend the ECM and get that scatter right back, which is a really, really fun thing. This is a ship that's going to be taking engineering first turn to bank that token, because it's going to have some other things that are going to obstruct and mess with your opponent. It's going to have 3 other things. We have the suppressor title already. We've talked about that. I want to fly this one out into the middle where I think my opponent's going to go, and I want them to, I want them to fly, near me and exhaust their defense tokens. They're not going to like that. I can do this to a lot of their ships. I can also slow somebody down if they're trying to get past my little bubble. Again, the Phylon Q7 tractor beams is a modification. There's not a whole lot of modification cards that you can really put on a Gozanti, so it's not really competing for anything. And the Phylons are great. in this case, because you can slow down anything that's a small ship, even the larger small ships like a Nebulon or a Gladiator or an MC-30, which likes to go speed 4. So this little Gozanti can slow down a very big ship, well, I mean, I should say a very big small ship, and still very fast ships as well. So that's just really, really great. And then, of course, we have slicer tools on this one to wreak havoc on board enemy ships and mess with their top command dials. This is especially good against carrier fleets. If you're able to get close enough to one of their carriers, now you can change that from a squadron command to something that maybe they didn't want, like a concentrate fire. And that's really nice. Again, this is multiple reasons that you want to have the engineering token with this one, though, because you'll either want to get slicer tools ready for a second go or in electronic countermeasures ready for a second go. I would say ECM probably comes first in the priority because it will help you stay alive, but slicer tools is fun to mess with people as well. So that's the Jerk Gozanti build. Hopefully I've given you some ideas on how to run a Gozanti in your fleet. I'd love to hear what you guys think, though. Let me know down in the comments section. And don't forget to join the Discord and like the video, share. Make sure you're subscribed and tell your friends. And we've got a whole bunch more over on this side. We're going to have some more videos for the other ship breakdowns, too. So that's going to do it for today. Big thanks to my patrons. You guys are absolutely amazing and help make this channel possible. So thank you for your continued support. I will talk to you all soon. And as always, may the force be with you. And always wear your socks on your feet.